So now we are in another field, completely different field, completely different way of thinking. Is about some few suggestions I may give you regarding the ability to write good papers. Did you recognize this guy? He's an Italian guy. The name is Galileo Galilei. He is considered the founder of the scientific method. It is the guy who created the scientific method. The sentence famous of Galilei was provando e riprovando, which, this is the Italian version, in English means trying and trying again, making an experiment now and reproduce the experiment another time. So this is called the scientific method. We have this is a joke of my son who is always playing with my face, the depth we have with Galileo Galilei. This cartoon is very, very interesting. It's showing the percentage of articles in sexual medicine, and in particular in the journal Sexual Medicine, received. As you can see now, at the moment, the record, the majority of the manuscripts received by the journal Sexual Medicine are coming from Asia, from this part of the world. It is a novelty of this year, till now, is the continent which is producing the large majority of the submissions of manuscript is Asia. However, there is a problem. In fact, if you look at the percentage of the published articles, Asia is the worst. Asia is submitted the majority of the manuscript, but of that, only 8% of the total accepted published manuscripts are coming from Asia. North America is the majority, then Europe, and then Asia. So what does it mean? It means that there is a gap. There is a huge gap between the articles submitted, the manuscript submitted by Asian scientists, and the percentage of articles really published, accepted for publication. In other words, looking at the numbers, it is clear, definitely, that science from this part of the world is very hectic, very interested in sexual medicine, producing a lot of manuscripts, but not always as good as they should be methodologically. So definitely, we need to improve the ability of the Oriental, let's say, Asian scientists to write good papers in order to succeed better. So the best part of the world sending manuscript is not the best part of the world publishing manuscript. So what we have to do together is to improve and to connect more the amount of the manuscript submitted with the amount of the manuscript published. And in order to do it, it is very interesting that also looking in PubMed, the term Vietnam is so rapidly increasing. It means that here is a part of the world where there is a huge increase of science, and that is one of the reasons I am so proud of being here, of being honorary professor in this university. This slide is very important. This slide is showing what? The common reasons why an article, why a manuscript is rejected. I am, in many cases, I am in several boards of several journals, and I'm working as a referee of the manuscript, even too many. I'm reading a lot of manuscripts, and those are the typical reasons for rejection of a publication, for rejection of a manuscript. First, the manuscript is not really addressing a really important scientific question, scientific problem. So what we may think it is important, looking at the general literature, appears as not so important. So the referee can say, no, it's not original. No, it's not interesting enough scientifically. In fact, the second point is that one. A typical criticism is that someone else did publish the same results or addressed the same question in other studies. So the second point is that this is not originality, not enough. A third is very philosophical. The author, the writer, believe that the study was consequent to the aim, to the hypothesis of the author, but this was not really true. So many times you can be surprised how the author did not take seriously the need to answer, to address the hypothesis he or she did. He may write, I wanted to study this because of this and this. But at the end of the manuscript, I did not find the answer. I'm not finding the answer. He, she is unable to address the question that he, she produced at the beginning. Sometimes there are difficulties in understanding the study design. Sometimes there are practical difficulties leading to the author to compromise the original study protocols. Sometimes, which is not a big problem here, because you have a lot of patients actually, but sometimes the sample is too small. Again, this is a huge hospital, you have a lot of patients, so I think that this is not such a big problem. Sometimes the control of the study is not so good. The study is uncontrolled or not well controlled. Sometimes the statistics is not the right one, and the statistical analysis is not correct, not appropriate. Sometimes, number 9, very important, be careful, because this is a very common mistake, very, very common mistake. The author is producing conclusions which are not based on the results. If I am demonstrating A, but I am concluding B, this is a very common mistake. What the reader, what the referee wanted to know is if there is a correlation very clear between the results and the conclusion. You cannot go away. If you have one result, you have to stick on that result. And your conclusion must be on the results, not on something else. So many times I'm reading a manuscript where is written, I discovered this, so I may conclude this one. Something different. No, you cannot conclude what you want. You must conclude what is in your data, what is demonstrated by your findings, not something else. And you will be surprised how many times the authors are doing the same mistake. Sometimes there is a conflict of interest, and unfortunately it's also true that sometimes the language could be a barrier. For me also it's difficult. My original language is Italian. I speak very well, I think quite well French, but English is not my first language. So I'm making a lot of mistakes when I'm writing, when I'm talking in English, as all we are doing. So this barrier is important. And when I'm reading an article, when I'm reading a manuscript, of course, to understand each word. And when there is not easy to understand, this is a major limit which may harm, which may reduce your possibilities to publish an article. Then there is another issue, which is called publish or perish. I don't know if you are familiar with this PMP. PMP system is called credit circle. It means that if you publish well, you have a lot of money for your research. And if you have a lot of money for your research, you can do the research. But this credit circle is also dangerous, because if you don't have money for your research, you cannot make the research and you cannot publish. And this is lowering your scientific power. So it is important to go inside this publish or perish system and to understand that in academic life, this is the unique way we have for making research. Also, there is something interesting to discuss. It's about the presence of industry into research. Of course, the industry is very important. The industry can give a lot of money, but unfortunately, the industry is also interested in research dedicated to a single problem on which the industry is interested in. But into a ideal, into a perfect scientific environment, money from industry are to be used not only for the applied research, like the clinical one, but they should be used also for non-sponsored research. So it is, let's say, a balance between the two, a balance between the applied research and the non-applied, non-sponsored research, like the basic one. We are all doctors here, but our research, our clinical research is based on basic research. Without the basic research, we cannot do any kind of clinical research. And this is the reason why I married my wife. She's a basic researcher, because I'm learning from her a lot. So which are the difficulties in the publish or perish system? There is a lack of integration, could be a lack of collaboration and networking, a lack of credibility, as well as lack of time given research and writing. All those points are very important. All those points are difficulties, increasing the difficulties in the publish or perish system. But also we have to say that sexual medicine, andrology, our fields are young sciences, very young, but we have also to say that the impact factor of our main journals is not so low. Journal of Sexual Medicine, Sexual Medicine Reviews, Andrology, Journal of Urology, all those journals have quite a good impact factor. The editorial boards are changing, having more people from other parts of the world, not just American as before. As well, the scientific standard in sexual medicine is increasing. So now, to publish in sexual medicine is not so easy. And that's good, because it's raising the scientific threshold. This slide is also very important. Apparently, all those sentences could be good, but they are not good. So many times, my students are coming to my office telling, you know, professor, I observed that one. I found that one. I do think that one. My opinion is, my experience is. Apparently, those are good sentences, but they are not. Always, they are not based on the evidences. So in order to make those sentences good, I'm always asking my fellow, I'm always asking my students, okay, who cares about your opinion if you are not able to demonstrate it? Who cares about what you think if you are not producing a good method to demonstrate it scientifically? Because unfortunately, our field is not the field of the opinion. Our field is the field of evidences, of numbers, of statistics, not opinion. I do think. Who cares what you think? Of course, I am interesting. Of course, I'm joking. But this is a really common mistake. What I want is a student, is a fellow come in my office to say, I have this method to demonstrate that I am right thinking about this. This is good. Not just my opinion, not just my experience. This is not science. This is philosophy. This is something interesting, definitely, but it's not science. It's not evidence-based medicine. ABM is the real antidote against opinions, which are not the best way to publish good articles. So a good publication is when there is an original idea, which is addressing a new and important clinical aspect, always applying the principle of the evidence-based medicine. Making a study design strategic and smart, with a good sample size and statistical analysis, with a subgroup analysis when needed, where the discussion and the conclusion are always evidence-based and never based on personal opinions. So forget it about the opinions. This is the major risk. Only stay on the evidences. Make your conclusions only on the evidences, not on what you do think. The second and final part of my short talk will be about how to prepare a clinical trial in system medicine. So what is a clinical trial? You know very well. Actually, it is a prospectively planned experiment with the aim to evaluate potentially beneficial therapies or treatments or diagnostic instruments in our field of sexual medicine. It is conducted under many controlled conditions, as many as possible, in order to provide definitely answer to predetermined and well-defined questions. So the question is the real beginning of the story. Regardless of the type of trial, in order to generate new data, genuine data, we have a key success factor, which is to plan ahead, to control the trial environment, and to check the data integrity. So a clinical trials in system sexual medicine is answering unanswered questions to add medical knowledge to current treatments, to increase our ability to make a diagnosis, to increase our ability to prevent disease and symptoms or condition or related to the sexual health and to reproductive health too, including the evaluation of one or more interventions for treating a disease, a syndrome, condition, symptoms, finding ways to prevent the initial development and recurrence of disease and condition, evaluate one or more interventions with the aim of identify and make a diagnosis of a particular symptom, disease, or condition, examine method to identify condition risk factors, and explore in measuring ways to improve the quality of life, the sexual quality of life, supportive care of people with chronic diseases. So global view on clinical trials on system sexual medicine. So this is the repository, the American repository of the clinical trials. When you have a good clinical trial, you may put it in this website, clinicaltrials.gov, so that people can check your clinical trial, how it is working, your clinical trial. It is very interesting, the fact that there is a huge increase age-dependent, now that we have a lot of clinical trials. So the important element in order to win, to succeed in the race to publish a good clinical trials are several. Our project consists in a number of processes, in a number of actions to conduce, to go about the results. So we have 5 basic process stages, which are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and the analysis and reporting. To know what the standards are and think how to implement, to develop internal guidelines, like standard operating procedures, templates, educate the staff, trial site management, internal quality assurance plan. So a well-conducted clinical trial is where they are publishing a journal with high impact factor, where the patient safety is assured, where there is a good regulatory approval, where the patient access with the treatment is important and good, and to the patient access to the latest innovation, the drug access to an affordable patient savage treatment. That you, as doctor, as investigator, as a researcher, are definitely very important for your professional development, for obtaining professional recognition, for your personal satisfaction, and for increasing your role in the advancement of medicine. And as I said, the pharma companies can be very important, very useful in order to help us as researchers to accomplish this aim. Do you know what the impact factor is? Impact factor is a very important number. It is a number which is identify the real quality of the journal that we are targeting. It is a measurement of the frequency with which the average article on a journal is cited into a particular year. This is the way to produce the impact factor, the number of citations per year under the total number of the articles. So a journal which is quoted many times, but is publishing too many articles, is having a low impact factor. A journal which is quoted not so much, but publishing just a very small number of articles is having a high impact factor. And the impact factor is traditionally calculated over the last 2 years. And those are the impact factors of the journals we are dealing with. The Journal of Sex and Medicine, the British Medical Journal, JAMA, Lancet, very, very high, tremendously high impact factors, but also our journals are very good as impact factors. But also there is another number to be considered. I don't know if you are using in your academic career, which is the Hirsch index or H index. For us in Italy, our academic career is based only on this number. If you want to become a professor, you need to have a minimum H index. Without that H index, is impossible to be. I am the chief examining professor in Italy for all the professors of my field of endocrinology, andrology, and sexual medicine. And when I'm examining the curriculum coming, the first duty I have is regarding the H factor. What means H factor? The H factor is the maximum value, which is H, suggests the given author or journal has published at least H papers that have each been cited at least each times. Is a joke? No, it is not a joke. It means that if I have an H index of 2, it means that I published just 2 articles quoted 2 times. I may publish 200 papers, but the rest is not quoted and does not consider, it's not considered. It's nothing, it's bullshit. It's not considered for the academic career. If I have an H factor of 20, it means that I published at least 20 articles quoted 20 times. So this is very good. We have a list in Italy, a website, where you can type the name of each scientist in Italy having an H factor more than 30. It means that those scientists published at least 30 articles internationally quoted 30 times. So it's clear what the impact factor is. It is a very mathematical way to weight, to understand what is the real weight of a scientist or an academic or a researcher. You have also a website which is called Scopus, scopus.org, very easy to find, where there is a list of the names of all the scientists around the world, where you can find the H factor of each. So if you go to Scopus, if you type in my name, you will see which my impact factor is, which is not corresponding to the number of articles I published. I think that I published around 200, 300 articles, something like that. But my H factor is 60, which is tremendously high. But it means that I have just 60 articles quoted 60 times. And trust me, it's really not easy. And as high you are going, of course, it's more difficult. To go from 60 to 61, it means that I need to be quoted 61 times. Each article must be quoted at least 61 times. So, of course, going from 2 to 3 is easy. To 20 to 25 is not so easy. But as up you are going, it is really difficult to do it. And the Scopus website is really useful in order to understand the real scientific weight of each scientist. So the clinical trials conducted to find a solution for clinical gaps or something unknown. The global number of the clinical trials is growing, and definitely there is a shift from Europe and North America to Asia, which is very interesting. The international standards being adopted for most fast-growing countries in our clinical trials to plan, to follow standards, to control the quality are all critical elements in order to conduct clinical trials. As well, that data integrity is also very important. Data integrity means that the data you are collecting should be available for other scientists. You have to use a repository so that I can check what you write, you discover. That is the integrity of the data, of the clinical data, is something very, very important. It is easy to write, I solve 1,000 patients. It is true. If you have a repository, if you have a system to check the integrity of your clinical data, this is good. But if you don't have, unfortunately, people will not trust you so much. Finally, the very last part is about the main kind of clinical trials we do have. You know that at the top, there is the randomized clinical trials, which can be interventional, where subjects are randomized to the treatment or to the control, like placebo. It is the gold standard in order to evaluate the therapeutic effect of a treatment, of a drug, and so on. It may determine a kind of causality between the use of a drug, and it is minimizing the biases and the confounding factor. The disadvantage of the randomized clinical trial is that it's expensive and time expensive, and it has potential for low generalizability. The cohort study is much more easy. The cohort study means something which is observational in nature. The subjects are followed over time for disease development, and the advantage is that they may identify the risk factor of disease and are more generalizable with respect to the randomized clinical trial, because they are usually going into a general population. They do cost. They have some difficulties in order to show causality, and there are potential risk for biases and for confounding factors which are not present in the other kind. Case control, very frequent kind of study, which is observational in nature, not interventional. It is when a disease case is respectively compared with the controls for exposure status. It is not so expensive. It's not so time concerning. It is ideal for a rare disease, and no patient follow-up is needed. But there is also to say that there is a difficulty in demonstrating causality, and there are potential for biases and confounding factors. Cross-sectional studies are also observational. They assess the prevalence of a disease, so they are basically epidemiological study. They cost not so much. There is not so much time to study those studies. And they are evaluating the association between the exposure and diseases. They cannot determine a clear causality. So that is a common mistake I'm always reading into the manuscript. When they produce a cross-sectional study and they conclude that they demonstrated a causality. That's wrong. The paper will be rejected. The manuscript will be rejected. This is absolutely not correct. When you are doing a cross-sectional study, definitely you cannot determine a causality. You can say it is possible that, it is very likely that, but you cannot determine a causality which is determined by other kind of studies. And finally, there are the case report or case series, also observational, and they are in the bottom of the scale of the clinical studies. So this is the pyramid. Here is almost nothing. Very low science. Case report, anecdote, and personal opinion. Not so important. Then, if you go up into the pyramid, there are the observational studies, like cohort and case control studies, other controlled clinical trials, and finally, in the top are the randomized clinical trials. But there is something else, which is on the top, which are the systematic reviews on randomized clinical studies. And we have three kinds of reviews. One is the narrative, where there is not a real method that you want to use. Then there is the scoping reviews. The scoping reviews is when you want to answer a particular issue. Like, for example, treating varicocele with surgery. So I can write a scoping review on this particular aspect, which is not a systematic review on varicocele, but only address a very small argument. It's called scoping review. And finally, the meta-analysis, which is methodologically quite important way. Unfortunately, a lot of people now are publishing meta-analysis not so good. They are not using good statistic methods. Trust me, writing a meta-analysis is a pain in the neck. It's very difficult. When my fellow is coming to my office, look, professor, I want to write a meta-analysis, I can say, okay, stop any kind of work and work on the meta-analysis for at least 6 to 8 months. Only on this. Otherwise, it's not a good meta-analysis. It's a boring job. It's a difficult job. It's definitely not easy. It's not just collecting data from others, but it's using a severe method, a meta-analytic method, in order to find which is the real final results. And then, of course, there are experimental studies like prospective, analytical, where the investigator is controlling the assignment of the exposure of the treatment with the strong empirical evidences. The observational studies I mentioned, they can be cohort or case control studies, as well the cross-sectional case series and case reports I mentioned before. So, review on the study design. There is an idea, a scientific research, the discussion into an advisory board in the university. Then it's produced a concept, a study design, and a protocol. The protocol is developed and the study is conducted with the approval of the ethical committee of the good clinical practice guideline of the protocol. And then we have the results, and the results are producing a database which should be available for other research, producing the publication, the results, and this is the end of the study. So now we have a roadmap to design a clinical study, having the question, which is the idea to be examined in the study, having an aim, which is the outcome of the study, which is expected to achieve, having an hypothesis, which is the instrument to test the validity of the theoretical framework of the idea, to provide a bridge between the theory and the reality. Then we have the endpoints, which are the outcome measured to reflect the results in the study type, it is experimental or observational, interventional or observational, and the methods we want to use that ties the study designed based on them. We have to minimize the risk, as well the biases, the chance measurement that are nearly always subjected to a random variation. Statistically, we wanted to minimize the error by ensuring adequate sample size using statistical analysis of the play of chance. The bias, which are caused by systematic variation and mistakes in the selection of patients, measuring the outcomes, measuring and analyzing the data, and taking extra care for it. The confounding factors are the third point, which may affect the interpretation of the outcome. The people who carry MASH are more likely to develop a lung cancer, for example, but smoking is a confounding factor to measure likely confounding too. So it is a typical representation of confounding factors. Each clinical trials must have initial, fundamental, primary questions. And this is to be defined. This is producing an intelligent and clever review of the relevant literature related to, examining the question potential and significant patient, and examining the feasibility of the study of the research question. We have an acronym, which is PICO. PICO means patient, intervention, comparison, and outcome. Patients, very important, disease and condition, stage severity, demographic characteristics like age, gender, and so on. Intervention, type, exposure, dose, duration, timing, route, way of the administration. Comparison, risk of treatment, placebo or other active treatments. This is the typical control study. Outcome, the last of the PICO, frequency, risk, benefit, harm, continuously or dichotomously, mortality, morbidity, quality of life, and so on. And the study participants are also important, considering the target population, the accessible population, and finally, the small population that you may study. So in summary, the randomized clinical trials is always considered as the gold standard method to compare treatment effects, to evaluate intervention. And the majority of the CET, the clinical trials, are aiming to establish the superiority or the equivalence or the non-inferiority or an intervention regarding the active control or a placebo. When while conducting clinical trials, bias and confounding factors must be minimized. Each clinical trial must have a primary question, objective, hypothesis, endpoints. Study type and methodology must be designed according to the needs. Randomized clinical trials are the gold standard for the clinical trial design, and protocols should be written in standard format. Trials should be conducted according to the content of protocol. And you have a lot of websites which are helping you in order to produce good clinical research. So I think that it is very important to improve the performance of the Vietnamese science in this new field, in the new field of sexual medicine, the new field of andrology. We are celebrating now the 15 years, the 15 birthdays of the Department of Andrology and Sexual Medicine of Professor Bach. So that it means that is young, but also very smart, producing a lot of data, as that one we published together regarding the penile measurement in Vietnamese men, published in Andrology, as well this one, which is investigating the microbial pathogens in sexually transmitted infection among heterosexual Vietnamese men with symptomatic urethritis. Again, this is my email. I will be more than happy to receive your mails, your queries, and I'm also ready for your questions, if any. Even if I think that is a little bit late. I have been supposed to end my talk at 6 o'clock, and now is 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for your attention.
Các bạn học viên có câu hỏi nào dành cho giáo sư không ạ? Vâng, xin mời bạn Duy chuyển mic cho chị Thủy.
Thank you so much for very impressive presentation. So I have the two questions. But please allow me have the question in Vietnamese. Yes. Thưa giáo sư, các bạn dịch vụ ạ. Thưa giáo sư là theo như là em được biết là còn có một cái kênh nữa liên quan đến cái việc kết nối các nhà khoa học, đấy là cái trang ResearchGate. Trên cái trang mà ResearchGate đấy thì cũng có cái điểm gọi là S-score, thì em đang không hiểu rõ lắm là cái S-score đấy để đánh giá các cái researcher như thế nào ạ. Thì nếu như giáo sư có cái thì cũng rất là mong giáo sư có thể chia sẻ ạ. Cái câu hỏi thứ hai của em đó là liên quan đến cái việc là các cái systematic review. Thế thì như giáo sư vừa chia sẻ, cái giá trị của cái systematic review đấy rất là cao. Thế nếu như bây giờ em làm một cái systematic review nhưng mà cái subject của em chính là những cái mà trên cái trang clinicaltrial.gov thì cái đó có được coi là cái systematic review hay không ạ? Vâng ạ, em xin hết ạ.
Your second point is very important, very interesting. I am the chairman of the publication committee of the International Society of Sexual Medicine. The publication committee is the committee which is in charge of all the articles published by the society, like Sexual Medicine Reviews, Journal of Sexual Medicine, and Sexual Medicine Open Access. And one big question is exactly what you did. How to evaluate systematic reviews and to understand if they are really systematic. Because it is a main point. The writer may write, this is a systematic review on something. But at the end of the story, this is not a real systematic because it's not considering all the articles published in that field. And the criteria that they are using is not always the correct one. So what we decided is to have a dedicated statistician who is paid only for evaluating if the title of the manuscript is really a systematic review or not. So systematic reviews and the meta-analysis on the top are really a very good instrument of diffusion of science. But I have to admit that I'm seeing too many apparently systematic reviews. And I have to say another thing, which is, I know that it's not so easy to say, but I will try. I think that who should write a systematic review should be somebody really expert in the field, not the young student who wants to have his name into the paper. I think that there should be a scientist at the top of his career, of her career, writing that systematic review because she knows everything about it. He is really able to deal with randomized clinical trials published, to evaluate the quality of the randomized clinical trials, which is not always the best. And in that case, I think that is a real systematic review. And I'm a little bit sorry that a lot of people believe to have a shortcut in the career, writing just reviews and not original data. So my suggestion for young people is to make your best efforts, not only in writing something which is not original, because it is true, a review article, systematic, Scopus, meta-analysis, general reviews, is not something truly original. It's not something coming from the scientific experience. It's something which is analyzing the experience of others, making a judgment, which is good, which is very important, which is tremendously important for science. But I think this should be reserved, this is my opinion, should be reserved to a real expert. Only when I wrote many articles into a field, I do feel confident in the ability to judge systematically the trials published by others. If I am a young student, I'm afraid that this is not enough. It's a good exercise, but I do not trust so much this kind of approach. So I don't know if I was able to address your question, but I think that this is a main point. the fact that one way I have to judge the strength, the power of a systematic review is the reputation of the author. If the author is a real expert in the field, I can believe that he is able, she is able to read, to judge, to evaluate the trials published by others. Otherwise, it is less easy to trust what is written into the systematic reviews. And this is the reason why we have so many contradictory systematic reviews now. We have some meta-analysis also demonstrating something which is completely different from the same kind of meta-analysis reached by others. This should be impossible, because meta-analysis, real meta-analysis should be objective, should use methods standardized, always good. But this is not true. In several cases, unfortunately, people are reaching wrong conclusions. That's the reason now there is some kind of super meta-analysis, which is another final end of the top of the pyramid, where there is people, very expert, who are analyzing several meta-analyses and producing the meta-analysis of the meta-analysis, showing the mistakes which are so frequently done into the meta-analytic method. So I think that is a very important point, and thank you for your question. Others questions from the floor? No, not others. Okay, because it's so late. Please. Yeah, yeah. Use the microphone, please.
Okay, I would like to ask you about the ResearchGate website. Do you know ResearchGate? Yes.
Oh.
In the ResearchGate, ResearchGate.
Yes. ResearchGate.
Yes. In the ResearchGate, I know has the S score. Yes, and I not understand clear about the yes.
Okay.
S score. So please help me.
Okay. Are you member of ResearchGate? Did you record yourself?
Yes, I have a member. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So ResearchGate, I'm not so sure that I know the methods that they are using, because in ResearchGate, I am receiving when I'm publishing an article, sometimes after 1-2 years, I'm receiving the news from ResearchGate that my article is quoted there. Sometimes there is not. And I know, it's not my case, but I know from the applicants of position of professors in Italy who complained with the ResearchGate because their articles have been not considered there. So they must write to ResearchGate that the article should be considered. I really don't know which kind of electronic system they are using in order to list the article. And what I have to tell you is something fun. I don't know now, but until a few months ago, since I published the article I showed you with Professor Bach, I was listed in ResearchGate as Hanoi University, not Tor Vergata University, which was a real problem for me. Not because I was not proud of being listed as this university, but because my university was complaining with me. Since I am one of the best producers in my department of science, the fact that suddenly my scientific production was, let's say, stolen from Italy and given to Vietnam for a few months was a big problem, because the money to the department are also coming because of the ResearchGate. So really, I don't know. I know that I wrote many times to ResearchGate saying, look, I like very much Vietnam. I'm very proud to be honorary professor of Hanoi Medical University. However, my first affiliation is indeed Rome Tor Vergata University. And I'm not sure that now, if you look at my name in ResearchGate, I'm not sure that I'm now back to my first affiliation and I'm not again in the Hanoi University. Again, this is not a problem for me. It is a problem from the university. So it is a very good question, but it is for me kind of mystery how they are listening the articles and why they are missing some articles from some authors and why they are listening other articles. But I know that you have the possibility to interact with ResearchGate, but they do have a lot of time. They spend a lot of time before to answer to your questions. And again, when I did check last time my affiliation in ResearchGate, it was again in Hanoi. So I think that is something strange there and really don't know exactly how it is working. Thank you. Okay, my friends, come on. And thank you so much for your attention. Once again, it's a real pleasure to be, it has been a real pleasure for me to be here. I really be open to any kind of collaboration with Hanoi Medical University, with the Department of Andrology and Sexual Medicine, with the students and the fellows of great scientists like Dr. Bach is. And I'm really looking forward to be back in this university that now I can call my home university, also because of ResearchGate. Thank you once again.